Good morning, I'm the last in line. My name is Ed. I'm an instructor at Una School during the weekends. During the week I run a software company, mainly involved in meteorological software that's being used for meteorological agencies in developing countries. And I'm also active in the hospitality world, running a chain of Airbnb apartments throughout Japan. Today we will discuss Iran and why Iran, because Iran has recently become a hot topic, given that a nuclear agreement was signed with Iran. This has been an issue that has been dragging along for a very long time. Iran was under severe sanctions, and the reason for that was that they were developing, or they were suspected of developing, nuclear weapons. And well, in July, a nuclear agreement, a nuclear treaty was signed. So today I would like to focus on the background of Iran and the significance of Iran, and look at and discuss with you what this treaty means and what this treaty could mean for Japan, because given that Iran has opened up again, there are very likely opportunities for businesses in Japan, but there are also things that we still need to be concerned about. So today, the two faces of Iran. In the opening slide, we see actually four gentlemen, but the main characters in this slide are the president and the supreme leader. The president is Rouhani. He was elected democratically in Iran. He is the choice of the people, and you see him make this V sign, this peace sign, engaging with the West, and on his slip actually stopping him from making any progress is the supreme leader, who is also the leader of the military and the leader of these scientists who are responsible for developing the nuclear program. They form the main. They play the main roles in Iran, and the supreme leader is really a brake on progress. So it's very important to understand the two faces of Iran in order to make a good assessment of the opportunities that Iran could offer. So first, a little bit of background, the country of Iran. The size of the country, to give you an idea, Iran is a large country. The size of Iran is approximately, roughly speaking, the same as the UK plus Spain plus France plus Germany put together, and you have the land surface of Iran. It stretches here from the Gulf, neighboring, of course, you probably know this, Iraq, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and what's significant, it's also across the Gulf of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia being more or less an arch enemy of Iran. The country has 78 million people. Most of they're a very young population. Still a growing population. The GDP is nominal GDP is about $5,000 per capita, which is relatively low. The Gini is medium. Gini meaning the indicator of how evenly income is distributed. So it's relatively well distributed, evenly distributed. In terms of reserves, the number one in gas reserves and the number 4 in oil reserves. But in order to truly understand Iran and its significance, we also need to look at the past. Iran played a very, very major role in history. The Persian Empire, you probably heard of this, but the Persian Empire, there are actually two Persian empires. The first Persian Empire was roughly, we can say, started by Cyrus the Great. It was 550 before Christ, so 550 years before Christ. So that's 2,000, approximately, roughly speaking, 2,600 years ago, by Cyrus the Great, and he managed, under his leadership, the Persian Empire stretched all the way into Asia, and here to Greece, into Egypt, which is an enormous feat if you realize that at that time, I mean, communication was very, very difficult. So you need to be very, very powerful in order to be able to sustain such a mighty empire. And this was all in the period, in about a 50-year period. Ultimately, about 220 years later, it was defeated by Alexander the Great. But a Neo-Persian Empire was established in 224 after Christ. In 651 after Christ, it became a Muslim nation. Now, Muslims are not a homogeneous group. There are different groups within the Muslim society. You're probably aware of this. You have the main groups are the Sunni and the Shia. Iran is a Shia Muslim country. Almost 99% of the population is Shia Muslim, this is a minority within the Muslim world. Only 20% of the Muslims are Shia. The rest of the Muslims are more or less in the larger group of Sunni Muslims. Iran and Iraq are the main country, the countries where most of the Shia Muslims live. Then in 1571 a dynasty was established. That means that kings ruled Iran. It started in 1571 with Nader Shah, and it ended in 1979 with Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the last Shah of Persia. Pahlavi was the last Shah, and he ruled over Iran with the help of a very severe secret police. There was a lot of opposition from the people. He had a very pro-Western attitude. He was educated in the West, had Western values, and his country became more and more religion-oriented. But he completely ignored everything and tried to suppress people as much as he could. This led to more and more resistance, and eventually this led to the revolution of 1979. But before that, we need to realize something, that actually already in 1953 there was a coup d'etat. A coup d'etat to put the Shah back into power. This was a CIA-supported coup d'etat, and this is in a long history of mingling of the United States in the Middle East. They have long tried to follow a policy of divide and rule, where they try to keep the Middle East as divided as possible in order to keep maximum control. Destabilizing policy that worked very successful. In 1953, the Shah was put back into power, partly also to safeguard their oil interests. Iran was a strategical partner, the largest country in the Middle East, and the Shah protected their interests. And therefore, the CIA, against the will of the people, organized this coup.
By the way, before 1953, this country's regime, what type of regime? Pahlavi is coming back to.
Yes, it was. It has been a dynasty for.
Dynasty?
Yes.
Still dynasty?
Yes. Yeah.
Why CIA involved?
Oh, well, they were overthrown. There was a revolution going on, but the CIA intervened and put him back to power.
Revolution going
yes.
on.
Yes.
Khamenei is.
Khamenei was, for example, Khamenei. But But so what happened after the coup d'état? Khomeini was how do you say that? It was
CIA interrupted.
yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So the CIA interrupted here, and Khomeini, who was involved with the revolution in the revolutionary group, was expelled from the country.
Put in jail, right? Until the
He was expelled from the country.
expelled.
Yes.
Oh.
And then things start to move very quickly in 1979. And I want to show a brief video that explains all the events that took place around 1979. It starts with the revolution in 1953, and it leads you through the revolution, the hostage crisis, and the Iran-Iraq. It briefly touches upon the Iran-Iraq war.
For most Americans, the story begins in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution and the hostage crisis. A group of revolutionary university students took over the American embassy in Tehran and held 52 diplomats hostage for 444 days. To help burn this into the American narrative, the news show Nightline was created with a nightly tally of the number of days since the crisis started. But to really understand, we have to go back to 1953, which is where the story begins for most Iranians. This was the year that the US overthrew Iran's democracy and installed the Shah, a pro-US dictator. In 1951, Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh was the first elected official who was appointed as Prime Minister of Iran by popular demand. He saw that the wealth needed to build Iran was leaving the country because over the past 50 years its vast oil reserves were under British control at the hands of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, later to become BP or British Petroleum. So Mossadegh became hugely popular for nationalizing the oil industry and taking back the oil. Hugely popular at home, but quite unpopular with the British government. Britain took Iran to the World Court over the matter and lost. They tried to hit Iran's economy by blockading the Gulf and halting trade. They tried to convince the US to assist with regime change, but then President Truman was not interested. However, when US President Eisenhower took office in 1953, Britain was able to persuade him under the Cold War pretext that Mossadegh relied on Iran's Communist Party for power. The newly formed CIA was sent to engineer a coup, codenamed Operation Ajax. Iran's monarch, the Shah, returned to power. He had previously been weakened by the new parliament, a short democratic experiment designed to limit his powers. After 1953, he returned fully backed by UK and US power, and the oil was soon flowing under control of Britain, America, the Netherlands, and France. The Shah became increasingly arrogant, opulent, and autocratic over his 25-year rule. He instilled fear in the population with a secret police known as Savak, created by the American CIA and Israeli Mossad, that tortured and imprisoned those who dared to dissent. He crushed all political opposition. Troops were sent to massacre demonstrators. He pushed a white revolution to modernize and westernize the country, giving women the right to vote and other reforms. But ultimately, he served the elites and created a huge economic gap for the poor masses. Powerful religious leaders saw that he was forcibly trying to rid Iran of Islam in a country that was 90% Muslim. One of the Shah's leading critics, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, was arrested and imprisoned for 18 months. After his release in 1964, Khomeini was sent into exile for 14 years. From abroad, he continued his anti-US, anti-Shah campaign through sermons on cassette tapes that made their way back into Iran and circulated as people copied and shared them. By the end of the 1970s, things had gotten so bad that major protests and the violence that followed were becoming a regular occurrence. The Shah declared martial law and banned demonstrations. This resulted in a huge protest and a general strike that shut down the economy. Soon over 2 million people flooded a public square in Tehran, demanding to remove the Shah and for Khomeini to return, and that is exactly what happened. One important thing to note is that the CIA orchestrated the 1953 coup out of the very same American embassy in Tehran that was later the site of the hostage crisis, right after the Shah was overthrown by popular revolution in 1979. The students were convinced that once again, the U.S. had plans to overthrow their revolution. In fact, U.S. President Carter did send a NATO general to instigate a military coup, but it failed. Iran and the U.S. had an extradition treaty in force that obligated the Carter administration to return the Shah to Iran as an indicted criminal. The students had 4 demands. Return the Shah to Iran for trial. He had been accepted into America for medical treatment. Return the Shah's wealth to the Iranian people. A promise from the U.S. not to interfere in Iran's affairs in the future. And an apology and admission of guilt by the U.S. for its past actions in Iran. The apology never came, but 20 years later, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright did acknowledge the U.S. role in Mossadegh's overthrow. So Khomeini took power in 1979 and instituted a government under Islamic law. Within a year of the revolution, Saddam Hussein invaded Iran without provocation, seeking control of Iran's oil-rich Khuzestan region and key oil shipping waterways. The resulting Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988 was the longest and one of the most devastating conventional wars of the century. At least 500,000 Iranians were killed. This war further cemented resentment of the U.S. government as they were playing both sides. On one hand, they were supporting Iraq, providing money, technology, and intelligence, including satellite photography, to help Iraqi bombing raids. The U.S. helped provide Saddam Hussein with weapons by giving him agricultural credits and pressuring Gulf states to give him billions in loans so he could buy weapons from Western Europe, China, and Russia. The U.S. Department of Commerce issued licenses to export materials for Iraq's weapons of mass destruction program. The U.S. continued its support even after learning that Iraq was using chemical weapons against Iran, not to mention against its own citizens, to stop an uprising of Kurdish separatists. But the imperialist tradition also called for maintaining regional balance of power. So the U.S. also armed Iran, not letting any one regional power get secure enough to dominate or to ally with its neighbors to challenge U.S. hegemony. In this case, it came in the form of the Iran-Contra scandal. U.S. President Reagan needed money to fund an unjustified war against Nicaragua, but was forbidden to do so by Congress. So U.S. arms were illegally sold to Iran through Israel and South Africa, and the proceeds went to the Nicaraguan Contras. This allowed Reagan to get around Congress to support a campaign of kidnap, rape, torture, and murder, for which the U.S. was convicted by the World Court for unlawful use of force. In other words, state-sponsored international terrorism. The ruling was ignored. Khomeini died in 1989, shortly after the war ended. He promised democracy, but essentially had become the next dictator. Although he improved literacy and much-needed healthcare for the masses, he also imposed censorship, violently crushed political dissent, and attacked women's rights. Instead of the Savak, the people now had the Revolutionary Guard to fear. Since then, Iran has been an oppressive theocracy. Khomeini was replaced by Khamenei, who remains supreme leader to this day. As a test of fairness, we might imagine that Iran invaded.
You better go to the end. I think no use finish.
No, actually, the end is a kind of like a more of an American narrative to put things in perspective, to see how this would relate if we would project this on the United States. But since we are not the United States, I don't think it's that relevant.
That's part which I didn't understand.
Okay, but I think it's the last part is not so relevant for the Iran case. So what we see here is that in 1953, just before 1953, the oil industry is being nationalized, and that means that the interests of United States and the West, UK, are severely threatened. and therefore the CIA stages this.
I think you already explained that the video content, Iran Contra, many Japanese don't know.
Oh, so that's later on. That's
Are you going to explain
yes,
that?
yes. So in 1953 they put Pahlavi back into power, and Pahlavi makes sure that the oil starts flowing again. Make sure that the Western interests are being satisfied. So this leads to a lot of resentment for the people, because the leader had the popular support of the people, but this all fits in the Cold War narrative at that time, because the leaders were also sympathetic towards communism, and communism was the arch enemy of the United States, who played a very important role in the Middle Eastern region. So this coup d'etat sets a lot of bad blood with the people of Iran. The leader, the Pahlavi, is a very much pro-Western, westernized region, completely ignoring what's going on with his people and the religious tendency within the region. He establishes a very strict secret police, and ultimately he cannot stop the popular demand of the people, and we see the revolution starts in 1979 with Khomeini coming back to Iran. Pahlavi flees the country and gets political asylum in the United States for medical treatment. He was diagnosed with cancer, but the people in Iran believe that the United States once again is mingling in their internal affairs. Furthermore, they also fear that the United States is going to intervene into the revolution. And this is actually true. It was later found that it was true. President Carter at that time was trying to intervene. There were two military ships in the Gulf, and he was going to use that as a bridgehead to get into Iran. Ultimately, he failed to actually stage this group, but the people of Iran really felt like they wanted justice. They wanted justice. They wanted the Pahlavi to be returned to Iran and trialed for the things that he had done to the people of Iran. So they stormed, mainly students, stormed the American embassy and held the people of the embassy hostage for 444 days. Ultimately, this hostage situation was finished through negotiation. Just after Reagan was installed as new president of the United States, within hours the release was signed and the people were sent home. So this hostage crisis, and this hostage crisis also strengthened the position of Khomeini. Then, in 1980, within a year of the revolution, Saddam Hussein is attacking Iran. He had been waiting for a good opportunity, and he thought that the revolution was, with the revolution still going on and not having settled the power situation in Iran yet, he thought that the time was right to enter Iran and take over a number of oil fields in the region. He attacked with the support of the United States. The United States provided Iraq with money and with weapons, and with the aim to overthrow Iran, with the aim to overthrow Khomeini. But Iraq also used chemical weapons, and Iraq was threatening to win this military conflict. So that was a little bit too much for the United States, and they also had some problems at home. The problems at home were in Nicaragua. Nicaragua had government was very much pro-communist, And they were very much afraid that with the power in Nicaragua being in the hands of communists, that the Soviet Union would establish a stronghold very close to American soil. And they wanted to prevent this. So they wanted to support the Contras, so the people who were going to overthrow, the right-wing people to overthrow this government. And they needed money for that. But Congress would never approve this kind of funding for the Contras. And therefore, Reagan decided, Reagan ultimately approved a secret deal where the United States, via Israel and via South Africa, was going to send weapons to Iran. And with the money that they would receive in return from Iran was funneled into Nicaragua, to the revolutionaries, or through the right-wing group that was going to overthrow Nicaragua. So this was really geopolitical play, and very, very important to understand what was going on in that period. So Iran felt very much betrayed by the United States. Always, first England before that had controlled Iran. The United States has been manipulating the region, and the resentment of the people became stronger and stronger. And even today, Iran has a very strong anti-America attitude. So this history is very important to understand the attitude of Iran towards the United States. So another important thing to understand, we saw the main players, Khamenei and Rouhani, in the beginning, in the first slide. And so Khamenei used to be president. President is here. So these are the people of Iran. They can vote. They can vote for parliament and the president and the assembly of experts. So Iran is to some extent a democracy. So these are the elected institutions: parliament, president, and the assembly of experts. But then here we have the supreme leader. This was Ayatollah Khomeini, and today it's Khamenei. He became the supreme leader in 1989 and still is the supreme leader today. And the supreme leader controls the judiciary, so the whole legal body, the armed forces, the army, and the Expedience Council in order to push an agenda. And the Guardian Council. The Guardian Council is basically the council that needs to protect the revolution. So that basically the ideological body that needs to protect the ideas and the values that were instilled during the revolution. So the supreme leader has a lot of power. There is democracy, but the president cannot do anything without the approval of the supreme leader. Now, the president is Rouhani, and Rouhani is a kind of like an open, a person with an open face, a smile, and who has been engaging with the West, with the United States, in order to get the sanctions lifted. Rouhani is a little bit of a different person, and I would like to move on and show you a little video, an interview with CNN, to give you an idea what kind of person Rouhani is, and how well he communicates with the international media.
How can the government of Iran support the regime of Bashar al-Assad?
Well, in a civil war, you cannot just consider one party's position. What has created a huge problem for the region today is terrorism. You know well, governments know well Even Western governments know well that all terrorist groups, the most dangerous terrorists, have converged inside Syria. And unfortunately, some countries are providing means and money to these terrorists. The Bashar Assad government has been there for some years now. It has been running the country for some years now. And if the people have some grievances, they need to go through legal channels, engage in a free elections for everyone to find out what the people need. Today a civil war rages inside Syria. We should come together to stop that.
If you had been at the Syrian talks, would Iran support a process which would lead to genuinely free and fair elections, even if that meant the removal of the Assad regime?
Well, the issue of Bashar Assad is not the main issue here. First, we need to push the terrorists out. We should all work together to prevent access to terrorists. I'm sure you have seen these videos, what the terrorists are doing, how brutal they are. And first, so terrorists need to leave the country. So all countries need to come together, work hand in hand. Later, conditions should be helped to come about. Those who oppose the Syrian government should sit at a table with the Syrian government. A conducive atmosphere should be helped to come about. Then, whatever the Syrians decide, that is fine. Of course, the Syrian people have the right, and every right. In this road, whatever help we can provide, we will not fail to do so.
Mr. President, during the campaign, you were quoted once as saying, "It is not enough to say death to America with words. We must show what we mean by death to America in action." What do you mean by putting the phrase death to America in action?
Well, the people, when they say death to America, do you know what they are really saying? What they mean to say relates to the aggressive policies of the US and intervention and meddling by the US. We don't want those to continue. We want people to decide for themselves. All countries in my part of the world, rather, I want democracy, or rather we want democracy to prevail. I told the people, if you want American policies to stop, we need to take action. We need to make the US understand that its meddling is inappropriate.
Would you like to see Iran have normal relations with America?
This is totally dependent on the US. The Iranian and American peoples for many years used to enjoy a relationship despite the differences and difficulties we had with the US administrations. So they need to change their behavior, they need to change their policies, and they will undoubtedly receive a positive response by the Iranian people.
What would happen if Israel were to launch a military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities?
Israel will not do that. Israel knows very well what the response would be. Israel knows well our regional capability, Iran's capability, and we know what capabilities the Israelis have for that matter. So with all of these in mind, these are empty slogans. When it comes to practice, the Israelis cannot do that. If they do such a crazy thing, our response will make them rue the day.
Mr. President, you are now at the center of the world, and I think it's fair for people to wonder, who are you? And so there are some people who say that you are a real liberal in the Iranian system. There are others who say that you are a wolf in sheep's clothing. How would you describe yourself?
من ماهیتم روشنه. من منتخب یک ملت.
I am an open book. I have been chosen by the people in a free and fair and competitive elections. The people participated and voted for a president who was uttering the slogan of moderation and wisdom. He says that he wants to have constructive interaction with the rest of the world. So the administration or the president for that matter is not important. What is important is the Iranian people. The administration represents the people. In the most recent elections, the Iranian people spoke very clearly with the rest of the world. Windows have been opened. I very much hope that the rest of the world and others will use this opportunity optimally.
Mr. President, it's a great honor.
خیلی متشکرم.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So this is an interview with Rouhani. He first commented on good morning. He first commented on the situation in Syria. You need to know that in Syria, Assad has very close ties with Iran. Assad is also a leader like Pashava, who the king, who also ran a minority, representing a minority. Assad, the same situation. They have very close ties with Iran, and he commented on the situation very clearly, saying, okay, well, terrorism can never prevail. So first we need to drive the terrorists out, and then we need to act in the best interest of the people of Syria. So this is not a matter of supporting Assad. This is a matter of eradicating vicious terrorism. So sounds quite reasonable. Then they speak about the role of the United States. Is there hope for any future relationship between Iran and the United States? Well, of course there is. However, the United States needs to stop mingling within internal affairs of Iran. So, and who are you? I'm an open book, so I'm open for democracy. And so this, as a leader of Iran, this is completely different from what we used to see with Khomeini and hardliners. He's very much engaging, having public support from the people of Iran. He's very much engaging, appearing on CNN, appearing in other American media. I also found an interview with Charlie Rose, who's a very leading interviewer in the United States. So he's basically, I think he's a kind of charming guy who seems to have a very balanced view of the world and is not estranging the world from Iran. Now this is Rouhani, but the other face is Khamenei. And I will not show too much, just to give you an impression. It's also nice to see one guy with a white turban and the other guy with a black turban, which makes it easier to understand. He's addressing a group of spiritual leaders throughout the world, spiritual leaders of Shia spiritual leaders, and he's talking about the takfiri, the infidel, but basically the infidel means the unreligious, the non-religious, which is actually basically anybody who is not a Shia Muslim. So even within the Muslim world, the Sunni Muslims are classified by Khamenei as an infidel.